Some guy said they didn't get it. I got it in the mail. So
Yeah, that makes sense. He says they didn't get it.
Some guys just didn't get it.
I believe that.
They have some list that they're sending it to Rabbi, and it may not have gotten to all the guys. I got a special. I'm a member of AIPAC, so I got AIPAC sent it to me, and you know.
Are you going?
No, it's this weekend. I'm here. I have to watch the store. The boys went. I sent my guys, but someone has to stay here and watch the store. So that's how it works. Do we have Chumashim? We have enough Bibles? Yeah, we do. Good morning, Rabbi. How are you? No, I'll take one.
How are you?
I'm very well. You doing okay? You enjoying your time off? Lucky guy. All right, Mark, will you... Good morning. How you doing today? What are you reading? What are you reading? Something good?
Yeah.
Insurgent. Is that one of the... there's that whole series of books, yeah? Divergent, yeah. Very cool. Is it good? Is it a good read? Okay, good. Enjoy this one. Good morning. Will you play Vanna White this morning? Good.
How do I know if it's on?
It's on. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Byron, how's Sybil? She okay? Coming back? You give our prayers. All right, give our prayers, please. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Good. Nice to see you all. Shabbat Shalom. It's a beautiful day outside. Go outside and get some air. A lot of our friends are at AIPAC this morning. The AIPAC conference starts tomorrow, but the pre-AIPAC Shabbat is this Shabbat, and a lot of the a lot of the members of the synagogue are there, so we'll wish them, if they're watching on TV, we wish them a wonderful time. I didn't ask you who you're going to vote for. So we wish. I hope it's a wonderful conference for those who went. You can watch it on TV. You can either get it online. If you go to the AIPAC website, you can watch the sessions online. And sometimes C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2 has them online. When I was in Washington, it's 20,000 people, and it's a very broad room. So they have giant TV screens. So you end up, even if you're there, you end up watching it on TV. So one morning it was very cold, and I just didn't feel like getting out of bed. And I was in Washington, across the street from the center, and I turned on C-SPAN 2, and there they were. So I sit in your Gotkas and watch AIPAC. There should be some very good sessions. One of our kids, Austin Shallett, is being honored. I'll tell you this story. It's a sweet little story. He's being honored. There's a showcase for tech innovation in Israel, and they celebrate Israeli tech innovation. So Austin grew up across the street from me, right up here on Densmore. He's a graduate of our day school. He's a graduate of Milken. Loved tech, just fell in love with tech as a kid. And Milken was they have a team called the robotics team where they make robots and they compete in contests. And he got a very special offer to go to a place called Worcester Tech, which is a technical school on the East Coast, where they have a very aggressive program in robotics. And he's done that, and he's worked in robotics. So he was invited. There's an international robotics competition, and every country sends a team. And Austin was invited to go as a sort of advisor to the Israeli team. So it's in Dubai. So here's the story. He flies to Dubai for the international robotics competition, and they have an opening ceremony, much like the Olympics, where teams carry their flags into the stadium. Into the auditorium or the stadium, and for some strange reason, the Israeli team was delayed at the airport. The Dubai authorities kept the Israeli team waiting at passport control in the airport, and they would have missed the opening ceremony, and Austin finds himself standing there, so he picked up the Israeli flag. And you can watch this on TV. It's an amazing thing. The kid, he's a very tall kid with flaming red hair, and he walks in carrying the Israeli flag. So the Dubai people had to see the Israeli flag enter the competition, and at APAC they're going to honor him for this. So he's a very sweet kid. He's a very sweet, sweet boy. So if you put it on TV, you can watch that and many other things. A couple of other interesting announcements. The guy who founded Trader Joe's passed away last night. So Oliver Shalom. Joe. His name was Joe, right? Columba. Yeah, he lives in Pasadena, and he's the one that created the whole chain. He sold it to the Aldi groceries chain in Germany many, many years ago, but he still maintained a role in picking products and stuff. So we'll remember him. We'll say Kaddish for him. This morning, after we finish here, we have a service in Sher Lapati, and our dear friend Debbie Levine is having her ufruf with Ted, her fiance. If you want to come and join us for that, there'll be Parsha study after lunch today. This coming week, on Thursday night, we're going to have a book night for my new book, and my friend Brad Artson's coming to interview me. Usually I interview him. He's going to interview me about the book, and you're all welcome to pick up a copy of the book, and I'll sign it for you. On Friday night, every year the Neshama Minyan, Nina's Minyan, does a Friday night, and they do it with the Jewish Women's Theater. Jewish Women's Theater is an outstanding organization that puts together original drama from narratives that people share. They'll take a theme and they'll gather narrative. I don't know what the theme is. It's probably in the Shabbaton. And family secrets. So what they do at the service is intersperse the prayers and the music of the service with the presentations of the monologues. It's a very, very wonderful service. So that's at 7:30, I think, on Friday night. Everybody's invited to that. And Shabbos, of course, is Shabbos. The following week we have Purim. Purim's on Monday night. It's musical and fun with little kids early in the evening, with bigger kids and grown-ups later in the evening. And then the week after that we have the new Purim Carnival, the Purim Palooza. Apparently you can no longer win goldfish. I don't know why. So many of the traditions of our ancestors have been compromised by this younger generation. I can't even begin to tell you. So if you have little ones at home, bring them to the con. It's a wonderful day of joyful silliness. Okay, that's all the things. There's a lot more stuff on there, and everyone's invited to all of this stuff, and many, many wonderful things together. If you, yes. Thursday night, March the 5th, 7:30.
Everybody heard that.
Yes, thank you, Oscar. Thank you so much. Right, and come in. It's the book about Rabbi Schulweis, so we'll be talking about Rabbi Schulweis's life and career, his thought, and his writing. If you have a Chumash, it's on page 485 today. If you don't have a Chumash, there are a bunch of them here in the room. 485. Hi, good morning, Boker Tov. Let me get my coffee. This is great. Come on in. There is a story that I love to tell the children, although frankly it is a much more sophisticated story than kids understand. It's a really famous story about the town of Chelm. Now Chelm, as you remember, is a town in Jewish folklore where resided either the wisest fools or the most foolish wise people who ever lived. And the story of the town of Chelm is that Chelm had a particular sensitivity to the moon. When the moon was big and full, everyone in Chelm was happy. When the moon was big and full, everyone was kind to each other and generous to each other. When the moon was big and full, there was a sense of just civic benevolence. But when the moon would go away, when the moon would wax and wane and disappear, then a sort of mean surliness set in, and a sadness and a depression. And so it was every month that when the moon was full, people sang and danced in Chelm, and when the moon disappeared, people were depressed and sad and despairing. It's sort of civic bipolar disease, you see. So the town council of Chelm got together to see if there would be anything that could be done about this. And someone said, well, the simple solution is we just have to catch the moon. How do you catch the moon? They asked. How do you catch the moon? Now, among the people of Chelm was a genius named Shmerel, and Shmerel had the observation that he was once eating a bowl of borscht, and he looked into the bowl of borscht, and the moon was in the borscht. He says, you build a big enough bowl, you gather enough borscht, you could catch the moon. And that became the civic project. They built a ginormous bowl in the middle of town, and on the night that the moon was at the very zenith, the very top of the sky, and big and bright, they put out the alarm, bring borscht. And they brought buckets of borscht, and bathtubs of borscht, and barrels of borscht, and they filled up this giant, giant bowl. And when the moon shone brightly in the borscht, they snapped the top on top of the bowl. And at that moment, the moon disappeared from the sky. Maybe a cloud went over. And the people of Chelm were elated. We caught the moon. We caught the moon. We own the moon. The moon is ours. Now, all we have to do is on nights when there's no moon, it's just to let a little moon out into the world. And every night we'll have the kind of happiness we enjoy when the moon is full. And it was the happiest day. It was a holiday in Chelm the next day. Except when the night fell and the sky darkened, the moon was back in the sky. So clearly, somebody let the moon out. And as the song goes, who let the moon out? And an investigation ensued. And they asked everybody. They asked the baker, did you let the moon out? And the baker said, no, I was in the shop all day. And they asked the teacher, did you let the moon out? And he said, no, I was teaching children all day. And they went one after the other to each of the personalities in town to find the moon stealer. And finally, the last one they came to was the rabbi. And they were embarrassed to even ask, because how can you accuse your rabbi of such a civic infraction? But they went to the rabbi humbly and they said, Rabbi, did you let the moon out of the soup? And the rabbi confessed, it was me. And he said, why did you let the moon out of the soup? Now, there's lots of wonderful endings to the story. But the best one, I think, is that the rabbi looks at him and says, my children, the things in life that matter most, you can't own. You share them. We give them. We give away the things that matter most. We give away hugs and kisses. We give away stories. And we have to share the moon with the whole world. We can't own it. We have to share it. So I opened the bowl so that the whole world can enjoy it. And the people of Chelm said to him, but Rebbe, what happens when the moon disappears and we're sad again? And he said, we'll do what we always do. We'll eat borscht. Now that's a beautiful little story. And the rabbi's going to tell me there's another way to tell it. Because he's a
thing about the story.
Yeah.
First of all, your setup was way too long. Secondly, it's a rain barrel.
I have an hour and a half to kill.
And I'll help you. Secondly, it's a rain barrel, not a borscht bowl. There's no such thing as that big a borscht bowl. Third,
there's no such thing as that big a bowl.
Third, when it's a dark night and they open up the rain barrel, which had the reflection of the moon in it,
yeah,
and there is no moon, the men of Chelm concluded,
yeah,
we were too slow to catch the moon.
Okay, that's a different way to tell the
now,
story.
the reason I correct your long story is just because I feel that way. But secondly,
no kidding.
Because I told this, I visited a man who was dying at the New Haven Hospice, which is the greatest hospice I've ever seen. It was a building back when they had money in the old years. And they built it with a kindergarten so that dying people could see children playing. They built it, the New Haven Symphony sent people to play every day.
Right.
And I visited this man as he was dying, and I told him the story of the men from Chelm. And the day he died, he said, tell me the story again. And I ended the story, we were too slow to catch the moon. And he looks at me and he says, I was too slow to catch the moon. And then he died.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You want to do the rest of the talk?
Just don't fuck up another time. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. There's dignity in these stories.
For those of you who didn't catch that on the microphone.
That was Ruth. She said that one.
He may have been ordained by HUC, but
I
it's,
didn't say
in certain matters he's Orthodox. All right. But the question I was going to ask, Rabbi, was, can you catch God? Can you put God in a box? Well, that's what the end of the book of Exodus is about. What does it mean to catch God? What does it mean to put God in a box? And there's an argument at the end of the book of Exodus about that question and what that question really means. What does it mean to say, we own God? We hold God. We control, as it were, God.
Means other people don't.
Hang on. And what's remarkable is that usually you have to go looking for the arguments that fill the Torah. The Torah, just like the Talmud, is written in dialogue. You just have to find the other voice. You have to go looking for it. But here, the other voice is put right into the text. It is a unique place, a unique sort of feature of this part of the Torah, that the commentary, the Bible, the Torah gives you its own commentary. They put the commentary right into the story. So here's where we are. We had 4 Torah portions which told us the story of the Exodus from Egypt. In Shmot, we become enslaved, and Moses gets called. In Bo and Va'era, we have the story of Moses' encounter with Pharaoh, the 10 plagues. And in Beshalach, which is the story when we finally leave Egypt, come to the Red Sea, cross the Red Sea, sing the song, and then begin the journey into the desert. 4 Torah portions, 4 weeks, we tell the Pesach story, basically. 2 weeks, we tell the story of the revelation at Mount Sinai, Yitro and Mishpatim. In Yitro, we come to Mount Sinai, we have that event at Mount Sinai, and the 10 Commandments are given. And in Mishpatim, that was last week's Torah portion, we have all the laws, all the detailed laws of how you are to live in the presence of God. Here at the end of the book, there are 4 Torah portions which are perfectly matched. Terumah, Titzaveh, and then Vayakel Pekudei. Terumah and Titzaveh, God tells Moshe, I want you to build a holy place for me. The famous line is on page 487. On page 487, verse 8. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a mikdash. Make for me a holy place, a holy vessel. V'shachanti b'tocham, so that I can dwell among you. We're going to build a place for God in the world. We're going to build a container. We're going to build a barrel, a bucket, a soup bowl, and we're going to catch God. And God gives us this instruction, and you can see at the beginning, it's not going to be a project of the wealthy and the well-appointed. It's going to be a project of the whole community. Because the Torah portion begins, if you turn back a page, right? Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moshe. Daber al bnei Yisrael, speak to the people Israel. Vaychuli truma, do a building fund. Gather in contributions. You think I'm the first one to invent this, right? Gather contributions. It says gifts, but truma is not a gift. It's a contribution, a donation. Me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo. From every person whose heart moves him to do so. Voluntary, whose heart moves him to do so. This isn't mandatory, except Moshe has to go ask for it. So he has to persuade them in some fashion, right? And then it says, this is what I want, right? What do I want? Number 1, Zot ha-truma asher tichum yitchem. This is what I want you to go gather, Zahav, gold. Doesn't start out with, shmatas, right? I don't want shmatas. Isn't that a rummage sale? I want gold, and I want silver, and I want copper, and blue, and purple, and crimson, and goat hair, and ram skin, and dolphin. Dolphin skins is probably not really dolphin skins. It's probably a kind of leather.
No, it was
I know. I read your storybook. I know your book. All of this great stuff. Go gather in all this stuff. And we're going to use it, and they will make, and it says, make me a sanctuary, make me a mikdash. Make me a mikdash. V'shachanti. Shachan is a very important word because it means to dwell, to be present. I'll be present with you. Exactly as I show you the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of its furnishings, so shall you make it. Now it says show you, so the tradition is, it says mareh el otcha. The idea is that Moses is going to see it. God's going to project it on the mountain, and Moses gets to see it. And now God describes it, and the entirety of the Torah portion is the description of this institution, this shrine. It's called, the English word is tabernacle, which always sounds like a skin disease to me, right? But it's mishkan, which means a dwelling place. I want you to build me a tent, a holy tent. And the thing is described here. You'll make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long. And the whole Torah portion, as you can see, are architectural design features of this thing, of this mishkan. Everybody see this? You read it. It's incredibly detailed. It's a very difficult Torah portion to read because it's full of a bunch of words that don't occur anyplace else because they're all the pieces of this thing. And as you turn forward, right, you're going to get not just the ark, you're going to get the furnishings of the ark. There's going to be a menorah. There's going to be a candelabrum. There's going to be a table where holy bread is going to be kept. There's an altar. Okay? And then as you go forward, this whole thing is kept in a tent. Ohel Moed. And the tent has to be built in a certain way because it's portable. And if you go forward, all of this is described. Now, if you'll turn past this Torah portion into next week's Torah portion, now Titzaveh, which is on page 503, now you're going to get the oil that will be burned in the candelabrum. And now bring forth Aaron and this is on chapter 28, which is on page 504. You'll bring forward your brother Aaron and his sons, and they're going to be the priests. But priests don't show up, in jogging clothes. They have to have an outfit, a uniform for the priests. And now you're going to get an exquisitely detailed description of the uniform of the priest. And that's what next week's Torah portion is all about, the uniform of the priest and what they're going to wear. Now, what you're going to get from this is the idea that this has to be done perfectly. We've talked about this a little bit before as we get to Leviticus. There are human endeavors in which we are permitted to improvise. Jazz is improvisational music. Okay? Modern dance, it has a certain degree of improvisation in it. But there are human endeavors which are highly articulated. Human endeavors in which it has to be done right. I mean, think about ballet for a minute. There's a lot of creativity in ballet, but it's done it's a highly disciplined form. It has to be done properly. It has to be done right, according to the rules. In many different areas of human life, we have a certain decorum, a certain discipline, and it has to be done right. Some of you are attorneys, lawyers. You learned many years ago when you trained that when you enter a courtroom, there's a certain way of doing things. There's a place you sit. You pass the bar. The rest of us are not allowed to go there. When you get up to address the court, there's a way of addressing the court. If it pleased the court, there's a way of doing it. And as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the higher you go in courts, the more disciplined the ritual is. The Supreme Court has an exquisitely disciplined ritual, as opposed to traffic court, which is a little bit less disciplined, right? A little bit more improvisational, as it were. Okay, so we have these, the worship of God in the Bible, according to the priestly tradition, is a highly articulated human endeavor. It has to be done properly. It has to be done according to a very strict discipline. It's not a place for improvisation. It has to be done right. And so the building of this thing has to be done right. You can't just build it the way you want. It has to be done according to the instructions. Now, as we watch what happens. You have two Torah portions, Terumah and Titzaveh, which give us the instructions for the building of this thing and the creation of the priestly vestments. Everybody got that? Now, we skip the middle one, and we come to the last two Torah portions in the book of Exodus, Vayakel and Pikudei, on page 552. And here, it's almost an exact copy of what we had before, except what we had before were God's instructions to Moshe, and here we have the description of what Moses actually did. And it's an exact copy, so that you see that Moses did exactly as God told him to do. Exactly as God told him to do. He gathered the gifts, he appointed the artists to do it, he gave them all of the materials, and they built it piece by piece, one by one. Everything that God told him to do, they did. It's exactly a copy. So Terumah Titzaveh and Vayakel Pikudei are almost Xerox copies of each other. The one is in the future tense, you will do this, and the other is a sort of in the past tense, and this is what he did. And this is what he did. Right? And somewhere in here, if I can find it, there is the greatest line in the Bible, which is they come to him and they say, Moshe, we have a problem. The people of Israel have brought us too many donations. So Moshe says, okay, ladies and gentlemen, stop bringing donations, which is a mitzvah that all Jews observe to this very day. It's in here. I'll find it for you. I'll have to find it. Right? And I want to thank you for that, by the way. God forbid there should be too much. So we have these four Torah portions, and at the very end, if you look at the very end of the story, if you don't mind reading the very end, right? Come with me now on page 571. 571, which is the end of Pikudei. These are the last words of the book of Exodus. When Moses had finished the work, that is Moses and the two artists that he hired, Bezalel and Aholiab, right? They finished the work. The cloud covered the tent of meeting. So they build the shrine, they vest the priests, they put everything in place, and then they turn it on. I remember when I was a kid in an electric shop. You spend 3 weeks building something in an electric shop, and then the teacher says, okay, let's see if it works. You plug it in, and you turn it on, and you see if it works. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it blew up, He turns it on. Moshe builds the ark, builds all the tent, builds all of the stuff, and then turns it on. And guess what happens? God shows up. It works. I'll be right with you. The cloud covered the tent of meeting. The presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. What a line. When God said, Asuli mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham, he does it, and God shows up. Moses couldn't enter the tent because the cloud had settled upon it. And the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And when the cloud lifted, the Israelites would set out on their journey. But if the cloud did not lift, they wouldn't set out. For over the tabernacle, a cloud of the Lord rested day by day. I've tried to get that arranged here for Valley Beth Shalom. And fire by night. Wouldn't that be great? This huge fire over the shul by night. And you'd know that God lives at VBS. That's because you haven't given enough donations. That's the problem. All right, so that's the story. That's how the book of Exodus ends. That's the story. Someone had a question. Rabbi.
So I'm just curious because I like this imagery of the two parshiot. I like the imagery of the two parshiot of sort of like the ballet instructions coupled with the realization of the articulation.
Yeah.
But in the middle, there's ki tisa, which is perhaps. Okay.
Pardon me, Rabbi. A little bit of congestion. Hang on a minute. I know where you. That's. This is a rabbinic self-tzimtzum, if it's okay. Okay, well, yes. Just 1 second. All right. So now what we have is, in many layers now. So we have 10 Torah portions that make up the book of Exodus, right? 4 Torah portions that tell you we were enslaved in Egypt, and with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, God reaches into history, reorders history, creates history the way God created the universe and brings us out of Egypt, right? That's Shmot, Bo, Vayera, and Vishalach, 4 Torah portions. Two Torah portions, the moment at Mount Sinai. God shows up in the world and says, now that you're free, here's what you're going to be, a covenanted people, and here's how you're going to live. And that covenant is going to be expressed not just in your highest ideals, but in all of the details of your life. Everything you do, the way you eat, the way you walk, the way you employ people, the way you pay money, the way you will be, your family life, everything will be an expression of covenant. That's Yitro and Mishpatim. And then 4 Torah portions say, I want you to build me a dwelling in the world. Here's how I want it built. I want you folks to pay for it. And Moses gathers the resources, puts it together, and God comes and resides in that Mishkan. So look at the arc, look at the narrative arc of the story, right? You begin with a God who's watching his people being enslaved. You go through that drama, and at the end, what do you have? A people who carry God with them. A people who have an ark, a covenant, an ark of the covenant, the tabernacle, and God lives among them. God lives among them. God is going to be with them on their journeys. Remember that word, vishachanti. I will dwell with you, in you. So the word shachanti becomes a noun in the rabbinic tradition, the Shekhinah, the dwelling, the indwelling, the presence of God. And the tradition is that wherever the people Israel go, Shekhinah goes with us. And when the mystics of the Middle Ages get hold of this, because Shekhinah is a feminine noun, all nouns in Hebrew have either masculine or feminine, she becomes the feminine, the motherliness of God. She becomes the motherly presence which protects the people Israel on all of their journeys. Wherever we are, Shekhinah is with us. This is the arc of the story. And this is the book of Shemot. The Shemot means names. This is our identity. We start out as a people liberated from Egypt. We become a covenanted people promised to God, and now God lives with us. We sort of marry God, and we move in together. The tabernacle's our chuppah. It's our bedroom. We move in together. We're married. We live together. That's the whole, and it works. 10 Torah portions, perfectly symmetrical. Right? Thank you very much. Go back to Shabbos. Because now, as the rabbi has deftly pointed out and ruined the surprise.
That wasn't me. That wasn't me.
That wasn't him.
That was him.
I have a whole collection of these guys. And now, there's an 11th Torah portion. What do you mean an 11th Torah portion? How can I mean 11th portion? It screws up the whole mess. Not just an 11th portion that screws up the beautiful symmetry of 4-2-4. Beautiful symmetry, right? But what happens is this 11th Torah portion throws, well, we would call it a monkey wrench in the old days, it throws a problem into the whole story. Because this is squeezed in between Terumah Tetzaveh and Vayakhel Pekudei. There's a Torah portion which asks a really difficult, painful, critical question. Can you put God in a bottle? And what do you mean you put God in a bottle? What does that mean? And when you think you own God, you created an institution and you think God lives in your institution and now your institution becomes holy. This is the critical point in the whole thing. And the Torah doesn't wait for Rashi to do it, although Rashi has a lot to say about this. It gives it to it right here. So today we're going to actually skip around a little bit because we have to read that story. And that story is chapter 32, and you'll find it on page 529. Okay? And when you read the story, you say to yourself, Oi! I hope you'll say that. Okay, ready? When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain. Now, wait a minute. Wait. No, you can go. It's okay. It's cool. It's cool, man. It's cool. Let's go. I have Rachmanis for this child because both his mother and father are rabbis, like my kids, and nothing that years of psychotherapy can't fix. Trust me on this. Right?
Keep the donations flowing.
That's right. You take the kid to the mall on Christmas, and he says, "Abba, I want to go sit on Santa Claus's lap." You say to him, Kid, how's it going to look? Your mother's a rabbi, your father's a rabbi, you're sitting on the stand. Someone's going to take a picture, put it in the newspaper. Right? So we made a deal. He could pet the reindeer, I'd take him for ice cream. You know? To this day, he's angry at me. I mean, this story, the time frame is all messed up. Rashi points this out. All the Meforshim say, wait a minute, when Moses was so long coming down the mountain, that happened like chapters and chapters ago. The time frame of the story is all screwed up. Moses is now back on top of the mountain. It's the 40 days he went up the mountain in chapter 19. This is chapter 32. How could you put chapter 32? It should be after chapter 19. That's where it is. It's a mess. But the point is that, all the Meforshim, all of the classical commentators point out that the timing of the story is wrong. It doesn't belong here in terms of chronology. It belongs after chapter 19 in chronology. But that's exactly the point. Because it belongs here because it's going to ask the question that's going to be raised by Terumah Titzaveh Vayakel Pekude. Can you put God in a bottle? Watch. Moses on top of the mountain. Remember, Moses went up to the mountain, right? Moses up there for 40 days. He didn't take a backpack with him. You know, like these stories that the hiker is lost in the woods someplace and they're looking for him, right? So he's up there 40 days. He's an 80-year-old man.
No Gatorade.
Right, no Gatorade. He's an 80-year-old man who went up a quaking mountain 40 days ago. Do we have a right to assume that an 80-year-old man, goes up a quaking mountain, doesn't come back for 4 or 5 weeks? You know, this is not looking good. You know, this is not looking good. And this is a people, well, you'll see. The people gathered against Aaron. They gathered against Aaron, right? And the Hebrew here is, right, Vayakel ha'am al Aharon. Now, each word in that sentence is remarkable. Vayakel is going to be the name of the last Torah portion, right? The second to the last Torah portion in the book. Vayakel means to be gathered as a community. And in that Torah portion, it's going to mean they gathered with Moses to build the Mishkan. But here they're gathering what? Al Aharon. Al Aharon doesn't mean with Aaron.
Against.
Al. They gathered on top of him. They jumped on top of him. They gathered and they said to him, make us a god who will go before us. Asu lanu Elohim. Asu li mikdash. Asu lanu Elohim. Make us a god. Asher yilchu lefanenu, who will go before us. For that man, Moses, who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. We have no leader. And we need a leader, and we want a God who is in front of us. We want a God who is tangible. We want to see God. That man, Moses. Right, and they're used to gods that you can see. So what should Aaron do? Aaron should say, no, my brothers, that's idolatry, forget it, don't do it. But Aaron, you don't know what his motivations are. Are his motivations positive or negative? Depends on which midrash you read. Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives and sons and daughters and bring them to me. Okay, now first of all, you notice that sons have earrings. So if your son has an earring, don't be afraid, this is part of the story. Right? There is a very wry midrash, I apologize for this, that said, this was Aaron's way of stalling because he never thought that Jewish women would depart with their jewelry. Right? Ooh, come on.
Well, don't forget, this gold was stolen from Pharaoh.
Well, maybe, right? It was a gift to the people. It was reparations for years of slavery.
Forget it, not back.
So is Aaron trying to stall so Moses can get home? Is Aaron trying to dissuade them? Or is Aaron cooperative? And if Aaron is cooperative, why is he cooperating? Now, how long can you play second fiddle to your baby brother? And then one day you get to run the show, and maybe that feels okay, right? Maybe that's what he thought. What is Aaron thinking here? And the people took off their gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took from them and he cast them in a mold, and he made of it a molten calf. Molten meaning it was a wood frame and you hammer gold on it. Otherwise you couldn't lift the thing. Now watch carefully. Listen to the two statements. two statements follow which are critical. The people exclaimed, what? The people say, right? Eila Elohecha Yisrael. This is your God Israel who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron said, tomorrow will be a festival of the Lord. So what did Aaron think he was building? And what did the people think he was building? And what's the difference? What did Aaron think he was building? He says tomorrow's a festival to Adonai, to the God of Israel. So what did he think he was building? Is the statue God? No. What is the statue? Come on, a symbol of something, right? In Mesopotamian mythologies, we know this now because we've excavated Mesopotamia. The god sits on a throne, and he has a footstool under his feet. And guess what the footstool is? A calf. Aaron thought he built the footstool, and he imagined God invisible above it. So what Aaron does is build a place to worship God, a place to come and worship, a God you can't see, a God you can't capture, a God you can't put in a bottle. This is just a symbol of the God you can't put in a bottle. But sometimes people transform symbols into the things they're supposed to symbolize. And the symbol itself becomes sanctified. So what did the people say? The people did not see this as the footstool. The people did not see this as a place to worship God. The people looked at the statue and said, Eila Elohecha. That's God. It's the people of Chelm. We own the moon. We own the moon. We own God. We built a bottle to capture God. Sorry, what?
But our Haron did not correct them.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Religious leaders often have a very different religious ideal than the people they lead. I don't know if you know this. A bunch of rabbis in a room consider, tell me if I'm wrong or right.
You're wrong.
I know.
You're right. You're right.
He maintains a monotheistic idea of a God you can't see and a God you can't capture, a God who is beyond capture. Adonai, Yud He Vav He, a word you can't even say. You can't even say his name, much less capture his being. But you know what? People want to imagine that they can catch God in a bottle. And that's what they think they have. We built a bottle and we caught divinity. Why do you want to capture God? Because the same reason the people of Chelm want to catch the moon. Because if I own God, on the nights when it's dark, I can open a little God into the world. Because I can get God to do what I want God to do for me. Because I own God. That's the whole essence of this thing. I own divinity. It's mine. It doesn't belong to the others. It doesn't belong to the people on the other side of the border, or on the other side of the world, or on the other side of the divide. It belongs to our people. We own God. You see the motivation? So now the two statements are so radically opposite, and there is the challenge of a monotheism that says you can't own God. God's beyond owning. That you can't even say his name, much less own him. And the people say, no, we want him. We own God. And where is this narrative again? This narrative was supposed to be, it takes place chronologically after chapter 19. But it's stuck here, smack in the middle of the narrative about the building of the Mishkan. The building, the only time in the whole Bible you're commanded to build something. You're commanded to build a place for God. So what do we have here? Ladies and gentlemen, we have one of the great debates. What's the great debate? The great debate is, can I build an institution, a symbol, a worship space for God without itself becoming an idol? Religion itself becomes an idol. Because it becomes so sanctified, we forget what it's pointing to. It becomes an idol itself.
And people start killing each other.
And people start killing each other because we own God. No. We own God. No. We own God. Well, if you don't acknowledge that we own God, I'll just kill you. You see? That story, that warning, as it were, that debate right here. So around it, you have this whole narrative about the building of a mishkan, a building of a tabernacle, and right here in the middle of it, you have this scream of warning that says, just be really careful. Because when you build this thing, people are going to think it's God. And by the way, what's the calf made out of? Gold. What's the mishkan made out of? Gold. What shape is the calf? It's a calf. It's a mythical creature well known from the mythologies of the neighborhood. The mishkan, it's a box. But on top of the box are kruvim. What are kruvim? Cherubs, angels, mythical creatures there, right? And the decoration on the parochet are kruvim. The whole thing's full of mythical images. Not so different. Not so different. The things are not so different, you know?
Well, people don't change that quick, you know?
Well, it's not just people don't change so quick. It's that we have certain patterns of how we do things. And the Torah is saying, you can't build enough. This story here is saying, okay, you want to build a mishkan? Great, build a mishkan. But you can't build enough safeguards into the system to keep people from worshiping it. People will worship whatever you build because they're going to think they own God in a bottle. They're going to think they own God. And I'm going to turn the air conditioning on unless we can open the door. Can we open the door? Is that okay? Thank you so much. Just it's quiet outside. It's nice. All the noisy people are at APAC. Good. Hey, APAC. Yeah, Bruce.
What does the Midrash say about what happens to Aaron?
Oh, we're coming to that yet. Wait, we're coming to that. Aaron, what? All right, so let's find out what happened. I just want you to see this story. It's what's astonishing, as the rabbi was about to point out, and I deftly cut him off. What's astonishing is that usually the Torah gives you a story, and then Rashi gives you a commentary. 2,000 years later, the Torah gives you the commentary in the text, and the way the place it's put. It's so amazing that it's here. It wants you to have this argument. The Torah wants you to walk away saying, religious institutions tend to be, reified in a way and fetishized. And what happens when religious symbols and religious institutions and religious persons become fetishized to such an extent, and they forget what they're supposed to symbolize? We do this. I don't know how many. You see this wonderful movie, The Two Popes? Go see this movie. Go see it. It's on TV. It's a beautiful film. Really interesting conversation that the writer imagines between Benedict and Francis. Two very different ideas of papal authority. And the thing is shot, I could give movie reviews. The thing is shot, they weren't allowed to use the Sistine Chapel for pretty obvious reasons. So they built one. Only Hollywood could do that. But you're standing in the Sistine Chapel under the picture of God. And they're discussing, these two guys in white robes and red yarmulkes, discussing what does it mean to be the Holy Father? I mean, what does it mean to be the Holy Father of the Holy Catholic Church? And look, we have the same sense of it. What happens to? It's such a remarkable. That's what the Torah is trying to say. All right.
Did you see what happened with the Torah goes around here?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The Torah goes around here, and people reach for it and kiss it and push each other out of the way, right? One of the reasons why we started a younger kids Simchas Torah. We do it here every year, is because I brought my kids once when they were very small, and somebody knocked them over. Somebody knocked my kid over reaching for the Torah. And he said, "No, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this." All right, yes, please, Farzan. You have to get on mic so the whole world gets to hear you.
So people need the visual effects to keep their faith.
That's
and
a
God
wonderful.
gets it.
People need visual effects to get their faith.
So the 10 plagues, the parting of the sea,
Yeah,
these
it's
are
true,
all
yeah.
reminders of God being with them.
That's a very nice
Now
observation.
they are walking and there is nothing, and I can imagine this ohel with the candles surrounded by gold, nothing but the campfire.
Yeah,
It's a visual effect again.
that's a very nice observation. There once was a man named Moses Maimonides. He's probably the only Jew in the world who didn't need visual effects, because he contemplated the nature of being, and by contemplating the nature of being, arrived at a deep and profound belief in God. The rest of us, we need visual effects, FX, right? And God apparently knows this, because in chapter 19, which is the chapter where this belonged, it's all visual effect. And it takes us to a mountain, and it's not a nice, quiet, pastoral scene. The mountain's quaking, rumbling and rolling and thundering. You know, God's trying to make an impression. The people are visual in that way, and they're sensual in that way, and they want stuff like that, right? But now the question is, how do you distinguish between the quaking mountain and the God that it represents? Can you make that distinction, or does that distinction get erased right away? That in the process of the event, the distinction gets erased, and the mountain itself becomes, ooh, holy mountain. That's the question. How do you make sure that people don't think they put God in their bottle, right? Isn't it interesting, by the way, just derech agav, in what year was it? 79, Menachem Begin gives the Sinai Desert back to Egypt. No group of religious Jews went and made a circle around Mount Sinai and said, oh, no, not this. This is the holy mountain. Nobody protested. I mean, they protested because Yamit was, the town of Yamit was dismantled. There was a town that was there. That entire city was dismantled and given to the Egyptians. Remember that? There was protest over that. Did you hear anybody protest? Right? Now I'll make it harder for you. How about Jerusalem? How about that wall? Is the wall holy? Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, you know. And if East Jerusalem becomes the capital of a Palestinian state, will we say, oh, we gave away? We gave away? I mean, you see this is an interesting question. Would God abide giving away half of his holy city for the sake of peace? If God, 500 years of peace in exchange for East Jerusalem. We take this deal? Interesting questions. It's AIPAC. I'm not taking a political position. Right? Do not represent the management of Ali Beshalom. You know, don't send me cards and letters. I'm not advocating. I'm just asking whether we fetishize, that is, we invest these things and places with kinds of significance instead of remembering that they symbolize something bigger than ourselves. That becomes the great question. That's a really interesting question. Right? Like lots of questions, lots of comments. So let's go around. Yeah, Brian. Then I want to finish the story because I want to know what happened to Aaron. I'll get to that. Yeah.
About symbols, and we need visual effects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think we all have our golden calves that we deal with, right? In some way, shape, or form. If you have a symbol, how do you? I mean, you talked about like the symbol versus the substance kind of thing, right?
Right.
When you said about the mountain and God, how do you distinguish between the symbol being a golden calf versus the symbol being a tabernacle?
Right. That's the question.
A symbol,
well,
right?
but see, I think that the writer of the narrative here, in the use of the language and his imagery, is telling you there's nothing you can do in the thing itself that distinguishes it. You have to know this yourself. It has to be in the heart of the person who approaches it. Because the tabernacle, because the golden calf was golden, so is the tabernacle. Because the golden calf was a mythical figure, so is the tabernacle. I mean, it's not the thing, it's not the object. You can't put a big sign saying, don't worship this, it's not God.
But clearly one has thought it was good, and the other has thought it was bad.
Well, I think the guy who wrote this is trying to tell you that all humanly created institutions have to be protected from becoming idols, including the things that are holy. Including the things that the Kotzker Rebbe was a famous 18th century Hasidic master, who was particularly bitter about what he saw was the way in which religion itself becomes an idol. You know, you're worshiping your own mitzvahs. You know, religion itself becomes an idol. And the Salanta Rebbe is a Litvak, the great founder, the great Musa Rebbe, used to talk about people who would daven with such passion, and as he's shuckling, davening with such passion, his tzitzis are whacking all the people around him. That's an interesting image, right? You know, that these tzitzis are whacking people. He says, what? Yeah, right? This is what this narrative, the only reason I can imagine that this narrative is put here is to make that case. So here you have a ridiculously wonderful Jewish argument. Right? On one side, the pious Jews who say, this is holy, and this is holy, and this is holy. And then the other voice which says, nothing's holy. God is holy. Everything else is just a symbol. Nothing is holy. Everything else. Look, you know there's a halacha. I'll give you a halacha. Ready? The most precious thing in a Jewish community is the Sefer Torah. Right? You know, the ark is open, we all stand up. Sefer Torah is carried, we all go kiss it. Right? God forbid you accidentally drop it, the whole community fasts. You say, I'm sorry. You're allowed to sell the community Sefer Torah. You know when? You know when? If there's an orphan girl who doesn't have a dowry, and she needs a wedding, and you have no other means of support in the community, you sell the Sefer Torah to give that girl a wedding. Now think about that for a second. The holiest thing in the community is just an object. It's just an asset compared to
Pigs in a blanket.
No, the dignity of a young woman, the beginning of a Jewish family, the launching of a Jewish future. Now that's a theoretical idea. No community would ever do that. But as a halacha, it says something about the holiness of about what's holy. And that's what this narrative is trying to get to. All right, who's got the mic? Please.
The other point is that God wants to dwell among us.
Yes.
So that's important. So
Yeah.
God is really different than the God of creation.
Yeah.
Where he was mostly an observer.
Yeah.
Here he wants to be amongst the people.
Yeah.
And so that is an important aspiration.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's the warning that make sure you do it in the right way.
Yeah.
Don't do it as a means of making yourself more holy than other people.
Yeah. That's a very nice observation. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti v'tacham. Make me a mikdash because I want to live with you. I want to share your pain and your happiness and your travail, and I want to be with you at those moments. But I need you to do it in the right way. And then, of course, what does it mean to live with God? Who do you have to be to live with God? Right? My dear friend David Ellenson used to say his mother used to ask a question, what kind of home would you have to build to have God over for dinner? Right? What kind of life do you have to live to have God invited into your life? Right? Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham in the rabbinic tradition comes to mean not an institution, but a way of being in the world. You have to asuli mikdash. Make of yourself a mikdash, so that God could live in your house. What kind of house would God like to come and have dinner with? I mean, that's the question. How do you make that? How do you create that world where God wants to live with you? It's a wonderful observation. Very different God than this scary God who lives in heaven and casts frogs down on Egyptians, right? Who's got someone? Lots of comments. We've got lots of things to say, which is wonderful. But I want to find out what happens to Aaron at the end of the story. So pass around. Come on, let's go. Let's go. You want to know what happens to Aaron?
Without giving away what happens to Aaron,
Oh, no.
is it possible to look at what happens to Aaron as a commentary on his leadership?
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Look, Aaron has a whole history. We should do a night on Aaron. Who is Aaron? Well, let's see what happens to Aaron in a minute, okay? But remember who Aaron is.
Is Moses' mother?
Aaron's the great-grandson of Levi. Who is Levi? Third son of Leah, right? What do we know? What else do we know about Levi, right? Levi and Shimon go one day when their sister Dinah is raped, and they destroy the people of the town of Shechem. And Jacob says, what? What was this for? What are you trying to do to me in the world? There is a violent streak in this boy, in this line of the family. The Levi line of the family. I don't want to give away anybody who is a Levi. But be careful with Levi's. There is a violent streak in these folks. That's the idea. And Jacob's blessing. Read at the end of Genesis in Vayechi. Read Jacob's blessing to Levi. That's the blessing. But Jacob, when the old man blesses the boys, he says to Shimon and Levi, "You guys are too violent for me. You're dangerous. You're dangerous people." Right? Shimon sort of disappears from history. Levi is Aaron. I have this guy with this violent streak. You'll see what happens in just a minute, and then we're going to see what happens. So hold that thought for a moment. Where does the violence in the people Israel go? We all have violence in us. This is part of us. How do you deal with it? Now, you can deny it and say, "Oh no, we Jews, we're gentle people."
We all have.
Just like all of us at our Seder tables with our families, we're always speaking in soft voices, right? Okay, where do we got? Who's up? El.
I'll be brief. We're probably past this, but don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon.
That's the point.
Another way to say
That's exactly right. But you can't. But see, the capturing the moon is the futility of the. It's the aspiration, but the futility of the operation. All right, ready? Let's see what happens. We're on page 531. Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifice of well-being, and they sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to dance. And now, in the white space here, before verse 7, it said, "Meanwhile, on top of the mountain, the Lord spoke to Moses, 'Hurry down, for your people who you brought out of the land of Egypt, they've acted basely.'" Anyone ever take your kids on a car trip and turn to your spouse and say, "Your kids are fighting in the back seat"? Or your son just threw up all over the back seat? You ever have that conversation? God says, your people who you brought out of Egypt are acting sinfully. And of course, Moses answers, "What do you mean you, Kimosabi?" You know? That's an old joke. They quickly turned aside of the way that I enjoined them. They've made themselves molten calf. And they said, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." God says, "I see it's a stiff-necked people." Verse 10. Ve'ata hanichali. Ata hanichali. It says here, "Let me be." Hanichali means back off, and hanichali means give me permission. Now, it's an expression. It's, if it please the court. But the rabbis go nuts. They say, God is asking permission of Moshe? God is asking Moses' permission? Hanichali? You're God. You don't ask anybody's permission. Hanichali. But what he means is not hanichali. Don't let me do this. Right? Again, anyone who's ever raised kids and turned to your spouse and said, "Don't let me get angry." Right? "Let my anger blaze forth against them, and I'll destroy them. I'll make of you a great people." It's Christmas.
Carol on, Bill.
I love it. What is God's impression is destroy them. They're hopeless. I mean, they were slaves. I brought them out of slavery. I did 10 plagues to show them who I am. I brought them across the Red Sea. I brought them to Mount Sinai. I did my show on Mount Sinai, and they still don't believe me. Forget it. I'll start over again with you. I'm in no hurry. Wait 10 generations. There'll be a lot of little Moses around. I'll start again with you, right? But Moses said, "Let not your anger blaze forth against your people whom you delivered out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent he delivered them." What will the Goyim say? It'll make the front page of the New York Times, and the New York Times will take great pleasure in castigating you, right? Turn from your anger and renounce the plan. Remember your servants Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Remember, you have a relationship with this people. You told them they'd have offspring. So God renounces the punishment. This is really interesting back and forth between them, right? Where God is the hothead and Moses calms him down. God wants to just whack him. And Moses calms him down. And at the end of the Torah, I'll give you the end. When at the end of the Torah, Moses dies, and according to the Midrash, God cries, "Who's going to hold me back now? Who's going to hold me back from my anger now?" It's a beautiful, beautiful scene. And again, it's a parental drama because we do this together. Not, You need a partner. You need a friend. You need someone else to help you, because it's very hard to parent a kid all by yourself. You lose your mind. You get angry. So what happens? So Moses goes down with the 2 tablets of the law. And the tablets were God's work. And when Joshua heard, he said, there's a cry of war. And Moses said, no, it's a cry of a party. We're in verse 19. As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hands. Vayashlech miadav. He threw them. Now the question is that the right thing to do? Is that the wrong thing to do? Was that a mistake? Was that a sin? There's a whole literature about that. He took the calf and burned it, ground it to powder, put it in the water, and made him drink it. This is a good parental thing to do. My brothers and I once had a food fight, and my mother said, okay, now pick it all up and eat it. I said, Mom, it's on the floor. She said, you should have thought of that before you threw it. And she literally made us all eat the cereal from the floor. We never had a food fight again. I was like, you want this? You want this so badly? I'll make you eat it. I'll make you eat. I don't know if it's good for you or not, but I'll make you eat it. And then Moses turns to Aaron and says, why did you do this? What did this people do to you that you've brought such a great sin? And Aaron says, let not my Lord be enraged. You know this people's bent on evil. And they said, make us a god to lead us, for that man Moses had brought us. We don't know what's happened to him. So I said, whoever has gold, take it off. And they took it off, and I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf. Isn't that great? Isn't that good? Busted. Now, he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed because he failed in his role. But the question is Moses mollified? See, it stops there. You see where it stops? Moses doesn't say, okay, you're forgiven. But he doesn't keep there's a tension there. There's a tension. So what's going to happen? Moses saw the people were out of control because Aaron let them get out of control. And he saw they were a menace. So he stood up and said, whoever's for the Lord, come here. And the Levites rallied to him. Remember the Levites? And he says, thus says God of Israel, put a sword on your thigh, go back and forth, gate to gate, and kill them all. And the Levites did it, and 3,000 people died. Who are the Levites? So he unleashes the violence. Moshe unleashes the violent streak within the people of Israel. Okay, now what's the end of the story? And Moses says, that is it goes on. What happens to what's the sequel? What's the sequel? Remember, come back with me for a minute, again, because this is so well placed, right? Come back with me to the portion just before this one, which is Tzaveh. Okay? Come back with me to page 503. Come back to page 503. This is an answer to your question. We have clear oil. 504, chapter 28. You will bring forth your brother Aaron and his sons from among the Israelites, and they will be priests. Make sacral vestments. The priesthood. Aaron and his sons become the high priests of the people, and the Levites become ritual functionaries. Is that a reward or a punishment? What does a priest do? He sacrifices, right? What is sacrifice? It's fundamentally an act of violence. But it's an act of violence now channeled, sublimated into sacred purposes. What does the priest wear? The priest wears a vestment that starts at the top of his head and goes all the way to the bottom of his feet. He's completely covered. You could think of it on the one hand as a beautiful golden linen uniform in front of the people that designates him as the priest. How about this? It's a hazmat suit. It's a hazmat suit, and it goes both ways. It protects him from the contamination of the people, so that never again is Aaron or the priesthood to be contaminated by the people's idolatry. At least someplace, somebody is pure. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the priestly vestment protects the people from the violent streak of the Levites. You bottle up the violence. And just like nuclear fission, if you bottle that energy, you can run a city off of it. If you create a big enough, strong enough bottle. Internal combustion. You bottle it up. You bottle up that violence and sublimate it and protect the people from the violence of the Levites by making it sacred. Maybe the high priesthood isn't the reward. Maybe it's the remedy. Maybe it's the remedy to Aaron's impulsiveness and to Aaron's violence and to the violence of the Levites. This interesting kind of way of thinking about it, right? Yeah, please.
I think in the Jewish tradition, the priest and the Levites.
Yeah, you have to do it so we can all hear. The world can hear you.
The priest and the Levites are the admired people.
Yes.
They're the first one to read the Torah.
Yeah. They're admired. Because because what an interesting. When I was trained as a classroom teacher, right? So you take a little class called classroom management. Right? So what do you do if you have a kid who just won't shut up? You put him in the very front of the room. You put them in the very front. You make them an example. You've got to teach that. You have to teach this people to sublimate their violence. So what do? You make them a leader. The violence gets sublimated into leadership. The violence gets sublimated into sacrifice. In the rabbinic tradition, the violence gets sublimated into the wrestling match of the Talmud. Right? It's an interesting question by how a people sublimates its violence. What do you do with the internal violence of a culture? And you're right, it becomes an honorific, but it's also a way of containing something that's profoundly dangerous in this people, the impulsive, violent streak. You see? It's a very, very good question. Bruce, yes.
I don't think you're going to have an answer to this, but this is one of these places where, frankly, the book doesn't make sense.
Yes.
First Aaron is at least complicit.
Yeah.
Then he doesn't take responsibility for it. They
Oh,
threw
yeah.
the gold in the fire and this calf came out.
Yeah.
So what happens as a result? They have to drink the calf. 3,000 people die. A plague comes.
Yeah.
And he gets the cushiest job in the kingdom.
I don't think it's, that's the point. I don't think it's
I'm not buying this thing that you're
You don't
saying
like it,
that,
huh?
that
Okay.
assigning him now to be the leader of the people is an adequate punishment.
Yeah, and it gets more conflict.
At best, he's inadequate or incompetent, and at worst, he's the leader of the revolution.
Okay. Fair enough. I think it's the Bible's way of dealing with the violent streak in the people of Israel. You disagree, but that's okay.
But there's an answer here that satisfies.
Go ahead, please.
And that is that there was a coup d'etat within the Bible. This is Ellis Rifkin's theory of Aaronide priests, that is a family within the Levites, who took over the priesthood with all of its wealth, and that they couldn't get rid of the Aaron story. It was just too well known, Aaron's complicity with the golden calf. So what can you do? You can only do one thing, which is what they did do. They buried the story of Aaron in the middle of all of this priestly nonsense, all of the details of the Mishkan and all of the vestments. And in that way, the book of Exodus comes out affirming Aaron and saving his reputation. They had no choice but to put the story in. But the guy who put this all together was a priestly redactor. And therefore, he had a vested interest in doing that.
Okay.
Now, the reason the rabbis were easy about it is that all of them were dead. The Romans killed all of them. And Rabbinic Judaism doesn't have this problem.
Right.
You walk for 2,000 years, you walk into a shul, and aside from the plaques from the donors, there's nothing there. There's no idols in the sanctuary. Right. And that's how they kept it. And the Torah understands it in the verse that you were about to interpret, I'm sure. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. It doesn't say v'shachanti b'tocho.
Right.
It doesn't say build me a sanctuary
It's in the
that
people.
I might live in it.
Right.
In a box in the people.
Right, right.
Don't ever think that.
Right.
It's build me a sanctuary because I need priests to run Judaism.
Right.
But I am dwelling in the people.
Okay.
I am not dwelling in the sanctuary.
All right, I don't disagree. I just want to offer an alternative. And here's the alternative. I don't think the redactor is the priest. I think the redactor is somebody. I think the redactor is the editor, the guy who put the stories together. I think the redactor is somebody who stands slightly outside of it. And I know we can disagree. It's okay. I don't think that he buried the story. I think he did this on purpose. So I think that there is a dialectical kind of skepticism. We need symbols. That was Farzan's point. We need symbols. We love the FX. We love the effects. Religion, like so many other things in life, is all about the sparkle, right? The sparkle of the moment, the sparkle of the effects, the power of the effects. We need that. But there is this tremendous skepticism about the capacity of people to idealize, to make into idols the sparkle, to worship the sparkle instead of the moment, to capture, to think that the accoutrements are the thing itself and not simply its symbol or its decoration. So the idea that you have priests walking around and everyone knows they're the guys who built the damn golden calf is exactly right. Because you don't idolize the priest. You don't worship the priest. He's just a guy dressed up in a vestment.
With a golden crown?
Yeah, and has yes, that's the point. The golden crown
Kadosh Ladonai.
made out of the same stuff as the golden calf. Don't make it into something sacred. He's just a functionary. That dialectic, that skepticism, that's how the system is built, right? There's a discordant note so that you won't worship the guy. So that you won't bow down in front of the priest. Ooh, you're God's guy. Take all my money and make my kid healthy. Ooh, you're God's guy. Give me a blessing on my house and on my family. Ooh, you're God. Because you know that guy with the gold on his face is exactly the guy who's the same, who's a fallible human being like you are, reaching for a divinity that can't be put into a bottle. That's exactly the Helm story. You can't put God in a bottle. Next week, we're going to learn Megillat Esther. We're going to take a look at Esther and find out whether Achashverosh is really as dumb as he looks. Have a wonderful week. Have a good shop. Next Friday night, come for Neshama.
Why do you think?
Yeah.
Why do you think the Babylonians
Thank you, Mark.
destroyed